Welcome to week 3, lecture 1 of 2, reading Isaac Asimov. We're going to start this lecture by watching a video from the University of Columbia about reading in college and how it's different from reading in high school and the steps involved. So I would like you to watch this video on Canvas. It's embedded in the lessons. And don't forget to take Cornell notes for your interactive handout. Now that you finished taking Cornell notes on the previous video, go ahead and check those notes. Can you answer these questions without rewatching the video? What are the 6 ways he illustrates are the most effective active reading strategies? How and when would you apply these strategies, active reading strategies? What examples does he give? Or provide your own? You know your notes are complete if you could answer these questions without rewatching the video. If you have to rewatch the video to answer these questions, keep that in mind and review your notes and try to think of what you would do next time or how you can fill in those notes to make sure that they are complete. What is active reading exactly? Well, it's the process of engaging with our reading in a dynamic way. You are thinking about what you are reading while you are reading. You draw connections to other ideas purposefully while you're reading. You question the information you read while you read, and you take note of those questions as you read. The opposite of active reading is passive reading, just reading for information or merely just for pleasure. Now, how do you do all of those things while you read? Right? It almost seems as if you questioned everything and took note of everything and thought about everything, that would slow down your reading and take you forever. And indeed, you may find that it does take you longer to finish an assignment or to finish your reading longer than it did before when you, whatever educational experience you've had previous to college. So there are some simple steps you can take to ensure you do all of these things. Step 1, pre-reading. So, in order to learn, we have to build on what we already know. To build prior knowledge, we should do the following before we read. We want to prep our brains for what's about to come. Okay? To do that, you want to Google the author. Don't walk into a assignment blind. Okay? Skim the text. Get yourself a little preview. Prime your brain for what's about to happen and do some background research so you have something to build your new learning upon before you begin to read. A lot of good reading involves prediction. Reading and predicting what's about to happen in a text, what the author might argue, or what examples they might provide. The more you predict, the more you gain experience in understanding where your own ideas might go or where you might want to explain to your own reader in your own writing and what your points might be. Reading and writing are connected in this sense. The better reader you are, the better writer you become. The more you write in response to reading, the better reader you become. After you pre-read and look up the author and do background research, the next step is to read the first sentence of the first paragraph. Then, in the margin, guess or predict what the paragraph or section will be about. Then write your guess in the margin. Now, for online reading, that might prove difficult because you might not always have a physical text in front of you. Although that is preferable, it is actually better to read a physical text and write in the margins as you read um, than it is to read something on a screen. However, that is just the world we're living in. And since you are taking an online course and the reading you will be doing is online, and chances are you may not be printing that material, it's important to take notes as if you were writing in the margins. I suggest Cornell notes, and I have some interactive handouts for you to simulate the experience of reading a physical print. So, what kind of notes do you take? Those kinds of notes that appear in the margins of a text are called annotations. When we annotate, we are having a conversation with the author and recording that conversation. So, what kinds of conversations do we have with the author? Well, we have personal, emotional, and intellectual conversations as we read. Personal conversations include having opinions and arguing with the author. Perhaps you do not agree with what they are saying, or perhaps you do agree, but you'd like to add some more information. Emotionally, you want to be in tune with how you feel about the conversation and what the author is trying to say. Perhaps they say something that sparks anger, confusion, sadness. If you are emotionally connected to the text, you will be more engaged with the text and you'll be able to actually pay attention and learn more from what you're reading. You also want to engage intellectually. You want to build on what you know, perhaps from other classes, make connections to other disciplines, question the author, or just have bigger questions that maybe can't easily be answered that would spark other discussions about the topic. Don't discount the emotional factor in reading. If you invoke your emotions, you will be much more engaged in the reading. It will help you pay attention. Normally, we don't have emotional reactions to things we don't care about, but we can invoke our emotions if we're mindful while we're reading. And if we can do that, our brains will catch up to the emotion. It will say, oh, we're having an emotional reaction. This must be important. This is how we develop a taste for things that we didn't used to like, such as Brussels sprouts or spicy food or even beer. It's an emotional investment we're making to force ourselves to enjoy something that we previously didn't. If we didn't have the emotional component invested in forcing ourselves to eat food that might hurt us, like spicy food, then we would never do it. The same goes for all other tasks. If you have an emotional investment in learning how to skateboard, your brain will put in the extra effort to learn that skill. If you are having emotional reactions while you're reading, the brain will put in that kind of mental investment into caring and then learning and remembering what you're reading. Many students make the mistake of thinking that they will eventually be able to memorize and remember everything they read. Unfortunately, our brains do not have the capacity to remember everything we read. Only people with photographic memories can do that. And so, only by asking questions, having and recording your opinions, rewording and clarifying important ideas in the margins or taking notes while you read will help you come away with a better understanding of the reading and increase your chances of remembering a lot of the important information that you've read. The second step is to revise your prediction. So after you predict from the topic sentence of the paragraph the first time, you may not have predicted correctly. And chances are, as you begin this process of active reading, you won't guess correctly. That is fine. Go back after you are done reading and taking notes of the paragraph and revise your prediction so that it does adequately reflect the information from the rest of the paragraph. If you do this for every paragraph, by the end of the article or the text, you will have a complete outline of the text. You've also practiced predicting for every single paragraph and revising and fixing those predictions, which is teaching your brain how to predict accurately in the future. This also makes it so that you are more engaged in the reading. Your brain is actively playing a game in a way by guessing and checking whether that guess was correct. This will help those who find themselves drifting while they're reading or becoming bored or tired while they read. The next step after you annotate and revise your predictions is to respond to the text as a whole. So after you go through steps 1 and 2, and 3, you will have finished the article. And at the end, you want to take a broader view. You want to review the thesis statement of the author, review some of the main points that they made, and review your own notes, opinions, reactions from the text. And then summarize that, not the article, but your own opinions in response. And this helps your brain solidify all of the information that you've read, which does increase your understanding of the material and will help you remember a lot of what you've read, or at least it will help you remember the main ideas and the points that you've read. Like we've learned from the last week lectures and those videos that we saw, if you don't review your notes, they're not going to do you much good, especially if you try to do them right before the exam. You won't remember any of the information and you won't do very well on the test, and you won't have a longer understanding of that information going forward. So it's important that you review these annotations and notes often. As a student, I used to review my notes right before classes. So perhaps I would have did the homework over the weekend, and then on a Monday or a Tuesday, I would have a class. I would show up early to that class and I would pull out the reading and reread all of my notes in the margin and read the text that was in reference to those notes. I would not reread the entire article again. I would just read the notes that I took. This works as a very good review. This works as a very good review of the material, and primes your brain for the next information that will follow when your professor starts to lecture. If you diligently take notes and practice good note taking skills often and review often, you will find that it actually takes you less time than it had in the past to study for something, and you'll even get better grades. The key here is to invest the initial time in building the skill in the first place. Note how these steps do not take a long time to do. You're not spending hours every day rereading all of your notes. You are merely reminding yourself what you had just done, maybe a day or two, or even the night before previously, and preparing to learn more on top of that from the teacher. This is what I call working smart, not hard. Keep in mind that this is how you will read every text in college. Every time you read, you need to read with a pen in your hand. There will never be a time you can just sit back and relax and just passively read a text in college, because all reading material assigned to you is meant to teach you something and support the material you are learning. So when we are engaging in something like reading for a class, we need to understand that it is always to learn something, to retain something, to fully understand something more deeply. And in that way, you cannot passively read a text when you're meant to learn from that text. At this point, you might be thinking, holy cow, that is a lot of work just to read something and to take a test or to learn something. And the answer is yeah, it takes a long time to do those things. It takes more than just sitting back and reading the text for pleasure. but I guarantee it takes less time than reading and rereading the material over and over and over again, expecting those those hours to result in actually understanding the material by passively experiencing that material. Students new to college are often shocked at the amount of time it takes to learn something at an adequate level that will actually pass the test. Unfortunately, because they're not prepared and don't have the tools in place, many students do drop out their first year of college. Only those with the grit and the determination, um, and the emotional investment in doing all of these steps, um, really end up making it and transferring to a four-year university. Practicing and mastering these tools, are difficult, but required to be successful in college. There's a reason why people invest lots of money in their children's private educations, private tutoring, and such, because these skills do take practice. Not everyone knows them, but the people who do know that they work and that they um, ensure success. But if you are goal oriented and emotionally invested, you will be willing to do these steps in order to become a better student. For many, some of those steps include going to tutoring and getting help from a master student who has figured out all of these steps, tips, and tricks to succeed in school. You may also need to revise your expectations on how long it was going to take you to do your assignments. For many students, they may take too much of a load of classes and work at the same time and find that they do not pass their classes not because they couldn't and that they weren't smart enough, but because they didn't have the time to invest in the strategies to be good enough. So an A student may be getting C's because they need more time to study to ensure that they get the A. That was essentially my story as a college student. When I started in community college, I learned these skills, and learned that that's the reason I did not do well in high school. Once I learned these strategies, it became clear very early on that they do take time, and that I had to make sure that I didn't take too many classes while I was working full time so that I could get good grades. Um, Over time, I had to make sacrifices, and not work as much and take on more school so that I could get through faster, but also so that I could invest the actual time that it required to pass my classes with good grades. Scientists who study learning theory know that these skills are an equalizer for students who did not have a strong background, or the money and privilege to have private educations where they may have learned not only these skills, but these values in education. So sometimes it's not just a matter of adopting these strategies, but it's also important to revise your expectations and how much time it's going to take to be successful in school. Okay, so let's look at each step in the active reading process more carefully. I have assigned an article by an author named Isaac Asimov, and we will use that article, which you will read in full for homework. So let's get started. So, the first step in the active reading process is to look up the author and predict the title. So, let's start with looking up the author. If you have downloaded these slides from Canvas, you can access the links on these slides on your own to be able to answer the questions on your interactive handout or at least on the reading handout. I'm going to go ahead and guide us through these links. A lot of teachers have said that Wikipedia is not good to use for research because anybody can edit this stuff. However, when it comes to just looking up an author and getting some background information, I find that Wikipedia is actually a pretty good resource. So, as long as you are not quoting from Wikipedia, Wikipedia can be a helpful resource for a student. So if we look at Isaac Asimov's page on Wikipedia, we can get a quick background. It says Isaac Asimov was born in 1920 and died in 1992. He was an American writer and professor of biochemistry at Boston University. He was known for his works of science fiction and popular science. Asimov was a prolific writer, which means that he wrote a lot and often. He wrote or edited more than 500 books and an estimated 90,000 letters and postcards. That is a lot of writing. Asimov wrote hard science fiction. Uh, just some background, hard science fiction is science fiction focused on the science of how things are created or made. They're a little dense. Some people don't like hard science fiction, but they will read light science fiction for more of the story and not necessarily how the technology works. Along with Robert A. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov was considered one of the big three science fiction writers during his lifetime. He wrote a Foundation series, the first three books of which won the Hugo Award for Best All-Time Series in 1966. He also wrote the Robot series, Foundation and Earth. He wrote a lot about robots, and you may have actually seen a movie version of his story called I, Robot. So he wrote I, Robot. I'm not going to read the rest of the article here. I will leave that for you to do on your own. The next link I've provided is this one. It's got this interesting looking creature on the picture, and this is the history of Asimov's science fiction magazine. In the history page, it goes into the background of the Asimov science fiction magazine. Have you ever wondered where George R. Martin's Daenerys Targaryen first appeared on the printed page? Where Kim Stanley Robinson first staked his claim on Green Mars? Who first published Octavia E. Butler's Hugo and Nebula award winning short fiction? What magazine was home to the first professional fiction publications of Jonathan Lethem, Kelly Link, and Alan M. Steele? Well, these and many other significant milestones can all be found in the pages of Asimov's science fiction. Asimov's was founded in 1977 by Joel Davis and Isaac Asimov. Then known as Isaac Asimov's Science Fiction Magazine, it hit the newsstand with the spring issue as a quarterly publication. The magazine immediately picked up a large number of subscribers, and by the next year, it had expanded to a bi monthly. By 1979, Asimov's had become a monthly magazine. The magazine is now released 6 times a year, each edition a substantial 208-page double issue. Isaac Asimov was the editorial director, but he insisted on hiring excellent personnel to edit the magazine. So I'm not going to keep reading. You can read this yourself if you'd like. But it just shows that he was not only a writer, but an editor, and also he ran this magazine. The last link is right over here. It is another Wikipedia link. This is the 3 laws of robotics. Note over here, this picture. This was one of the cover of iRobot, I believe, when it was first printed. Okay, some engineers, engineering majors, may actually know the three laws of robotics or have heard of them. They were coined by Isaac Asimov in his stories about robots. So the 3 laws of robotics, often shortened to the 3 laws, or known as Asimov's laws, are a set of rules devised by the science fiction author Isaac Asimov. The rules were introduced in 1942 short story Runaround, included in the 1950 collection I, Robot, although they had been foreshadowed in a few earlier stories. The three laws, quoted as being from the Handbook of Robotics, 56th edition, 2058 AD. Note how that's in the future. And many of you will be alive in 2058 AD. I wonder if there will be any robots. Um, First law, a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Second law, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except when such orders would conflict with the first law. Third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. These form an organizing principle and unifying theme for Asimov's robot based fiction appearing in his Robot series. Okay. Even some scientists have adopted these rules, and engineers have adopted these laws to be embedded in the code and engineering of robots in the future to ensure, that they don't rise up against us. So now that we have a background of who Isaac Asimov is, when he was born, in what era he lived, some of his achievements, we now have a background to before we begin reading. Okay, so ask yourself, and this will be in the reading handouts that will be due for homework on Wednesday. These questions that you have to answer, you can answer them now and then just transcribe them into that handout. Who is he? What is he known for? Have you read any of his books? Watched any of his movies made from his books? I have read I, Robot. I've read the Federation series. Um, I'm a big fan of science fiction. Who is he? What is he known for? Well, we just read a bunch of those links. You can do that on your own. Just for the purposes of this video and these slides, he is an author of science fiction, and he liked to focus specifically on robots, and he was kind to the idea of them. He liked the idea of robots. He created these three laws to protect human beings from robots, and also to protect the robots from human beings. That is a big theme in his work. Uh, Artificial intelligence is also a very big theme in his work, making robots sentient or smart or kind of alive, quote unquote. With that said, when we go to the next slide, it says that the second part of step one is to predict what the article will be about based on the title. And based on what we know about Isaac Asimov, when we read the title, What is Intelligence Anyway? What might he be discussing in this article? Or why, right? How might his research and interests in robotics influence him to write about intelligence? What do you think some of his points may be about the relationship between education and intelligence? What else might he discuss in this article? Note you will answer these questions in the graphic organizer or the Cornell Notes files on Canvas. You can find them on Canvas. They are interactive questions that I've posed that you need to answer in one of those two handouts. And the explanation for that homework is on Canvas as well. Many of you will notice now that that information that we gathered from Isaac Asimov's background is already informing us of what this article might be about. Because we know he's interested in artificial intelligence, in creating intelligence, robots, he already has the authority and the background to discuss this. He's already interested and curious about this. So we can start predicting, well, if he is asking the question, what is intelligence anyway? Perhaps he might be trying to define it. And if we can define it in a way, then maybe we can reproduce it. I'm not saying that that is what this article is about, but it does help inform and prime our brains to look for those themes while we read, which keeps us interested. It keeps the brain engaged and will help us remember a lot of these main points as we read the article. Step two, After we have done background research on the author and predicted what the article might be about based on the title, we need to read and predict the topic of the paragraph by reading the topic sentences. So this is where more prediction comes in to keep us engaged as we read and start practicing our prediction skills. So, a topic sentence is the first sentence of a body paragraph. Keep in mind that when you write an essay, an introduction does not have a topic sentence, the introductory paragraph, just the body paragraphs. Okay. But for the purposes of the active reading, you just read the first sentence of each body paragraph. That would include the introduction. So, what you want to do is read the first sentence of the first paragraph in Asimov's What is Intelligence Anyway? The first sentence of the first paragraph is When I was in the Army, I received the kind of aptitude test that all soldiers took and, against a normal of 100, scored 160. You can take the option to press pause in this video right now if you would like to guess or predict what this paragraph or section will be about. If you don't, that's fine. We'll just keep going. My prediction after I read that sentence went something like, he's going to probably talk about how he's really, really smart. He's going to introduce the topic by sharing his own experience with aptitude tests. Step 3. So we read the rest of the paragraph and we annotate the text. In other words, we record our thinking and we actively think while we read in various ways. I color coded what I reacted to in the margins here. If you had a physical text in front of you, you would just pick up your pen and just write in the margin right next to where you had the thought. But if you are reading this online, you might have to take notes on a separate piece of paper, which requires you to maybe even handwrite certain quotes word for word or in your own words so that your notes make sense. The key to taking smart notes is to never have to read the article again. You should only ever have to read your notes and perhaps some of the quotes that they were in response to. Um, to read the paragraph here, when I was in the Army, I received the kind of aptitude test that all soldiers took and against of a normal 100 scored 160. No one at the base had ever seen a figure like that, and for 2 hours they made a big fuss over me. It didn't mean anything. The next day I was still a buck private with KP, Kitchen Police, as my highest duty. Um, So, the different kinds of annotations you want to make are personal, emotional, and intellectual. Here, I wrote the word aptitude, and then I put the colon here and I wrote mental ability. That is a vocabulary word that you may not know. If you find vocabulary words you don't know, don't stop the reading to look them up. Just circle them or highlight them and move on. Just look them up later and then have a growing list of new words that you are learning. And in fact, you can use those lists later to maybe fold into your essays so that you truly own the word and then you truly know what it means. Moving forward, this yellow one right here, it says, that's really smart. And it says normal of 100 scored 160. 160 is more than half of uh, 100 well, of 100, and if 100 is average, then 160 is extremely smart. So I thought that was, I had an emotional reaction here, so I marked it. Down below it says, I wonder what year this was he drafted? And to be drafted, as you know, it means that you didn't really have a choice to go into the military. And then if you think about the background information and you realize he was born in 1920, then he was at the right age when World War II came out, which means he probably volunteered to go into the military. And this was probably World War II. Now, do we know this for certain? No, he could have been in the Korean War for all we know. So, down at the bottom in orange, it says best guess. I bet he volunteered. I'm guessing World War II. So, I'm writing down my guesses as well. I'm answering my own questions here. Then over in the blue highlighted section, it says that the next day I was still a buck private with KP kitchen police as my highest duty. And then I highlighted it here. It said my highest duty. And I thought that was interesting. And I wrote, everyone starts in the same place in the military. His intelligence wasn't going to help him do push ups or follow instructions or increase his physical fitness, which is what he needed to do no matter what his score was on his intelligence. And so, in this way, he's kind of showing that his intelligence didn't matter. It was surprising and interesting, but it didn't matter. In this way, he seems to be showing how, yes, he is smart, and yes, people react to that, become surprised by it. But sometimes being intelligent on a test isn't going to help you in all situations. So, moving on to step 4, revising your prediction, you're going to go back to step 2 in a way. You're going to look at your prediction and ask yourself, now that I have read the entire paragraph, is my prediction complete or correct? So, my original prediction from step 2 was he's going to probably talk about how he's really smart. He's going to introduce the topic by sharing his experience with aptitude tests. Is correct, but it is a little, not complete. It's not exactly correct. So I want to update it. I want it to be able to fully encapsulate what's going on in that paragraph. Okay. And so I revised it to something like he starts with how he learned his IQ in the military, but shows how his intelligence wasn't important in that scenario. Okay. So in my revision, I talked a bit about what the author was probably doing or establishing in that paragraph. Note that all of your revised predictions, when added together, become a outline of the whole article. So that's a neat trick to come up with a outline of the entire article by revising your predictions. Now, it's at this point that you want to go to your interactive handout that has the reading embedded in it. You had two options. You could use the Cornell Notes method of taking notes for reading, or you could use the graphic organizer I designed and embedded the article in that, and you can take notes that way. The handouts, both of them prompt you to do steps 2 through 4 on the rest of the article. After you finish reading the article and applying all of the steps to every paragraph, or steps 2 through 4, you move on to step 5, and the homework will prompt you to do this. Okay. You're going to give a 300-word free written response in response to the article. Now, it's important not to summarize the article. You already have an outline of the article with your revised predictions in the margin or on a separate piece of paper with notes. So you don't need to do a summary. That's not the point of the free write. The point is to review your annotations and answer some questions you may have posed or develop some more on an opinion you had in response to the author. You could bring up the author's thesis or a main point and react to that. But it's important that you respond with an opinion, not a summary of the article. And again, like I mentioned earlier, after you finish the homework, before you begin the next lecture's uh, slides and material, you reread your notes, you review the opinions that you've had about the article, you review these slides or the material to make sure you remember what all of the reading steps are. Okay. And I hope you apply this to other classes. And if you do, it's just a good habit to start your class maybe 5 minutes early or 10 minutes early. Show up, have the Zoom channel open or at least on your screen, and just goes through your notes, reread everything that you did. And if you do that for every class session, just show up 10 minutes early and review your notes. Be giving your mind a chance to process the material, to review it, to understand it, to think about it a little bit more. And in that way, you're not going to cram for a test, you are continually rereading and reviewing what you've done and your notes, and you're priming your brain for the class, which will add more information on top of what you did for homework. Now, before I move on to the next slide, I want to ask you if you can remember all of the steps to the reading process. If I were to give you a quiz and say there are 5 steps to the reading process, what are they? Would you be able to answer that question? If the answer is no, that's okay. You just learned it. Go through your notes then. Would your notes tell you the answers to those questions? If not, you maybe need to take more thorough notes. So, as a student, taking notes is a skill and it takes practice, and we are practicing. So, right now, I would just like you to take a moment, look through your Cornell notes or any notes that you've been taking during this lecture, and I would like you to see if you know all of the 5 reading steps that we've covered. Press pause now to see if your notes are complete. All right. How'd you do? So, could you remember them all or were they in your notes? Let's check. The first step is to research the author and predict from the title of the article. Step 2 is to read the first sentence of each body paragraph and predict in the margin. Step 3, read and annotate the rest of the paragraph. Make sure you do more than just predict or find main ideas. You need to make personal connections, comparison to other things you've learned in college, questions you may have. Remember, you need to take personal, emotional, and intellectual notes as you read. The fourth step is to revise your prediction in the margin. Make sure it fully outlines the main idea of that paragraph, because essentially this will be the outline of the author's main ideas by the end of the reading process for that article. Step 5, write an opinionated paragraph free write in response to the article. And that is all the steps. To conclude the lecture, I would like you to answer these questions on the interactive lecture handouts that are posted on Canvas, okay? Or you could just do it by hand now and you can upload it to that forum later. So answer the following questions. Free write in response to the following. 1. How was this reading process different than how you read in the past before you took this class? In what ways can this reading process help you in your other classes that assign reading? 3. Do you think these steps can work for all types of reading? How about a novel? Would it work for reading a novel? How about a textbook? How might you be able to apply these types of notes to your writing assignments? In essentially, in what way might these notes help you write your writing assignments? And that's it. That's the slides for the lecture for the first part of week 3. Again, if you have any questions at all, go to the question forum or discussion on Canvas and I will get back to you. You can also come to office hours. They are between 1 and 2 on Wednesdays on Zoom. If this material is difficult, you can ask me questions. But again, I really encourage you to go to tutoring. Um, you can sign up through Evergreen. There's 24-hour tutoring, and there's tutoring at the tutoring center or through the tutoring center. And you sign up on Pisces, and all that information is on Canvas. And please share this materials with your tutor if you feel it's necessary or if you think it would help them understand your assignment better.